The rumble of history often begins with a whisper. It can be a casual dismissal. Then it grows into an earth-shattering roar. On January 30, 1933, Adolf Hitler ascended to the chancellorship of Germany. Many, like the urbane banker Ernst Angris, scoffed. He declared Hitler won't last 2 weeks. He reduced the rising demagogue to a political joke, a Hitler herring. This widespread underestimation of a burgeoning evil would prove to be a fatal miscalculation for millions. For Germany's Jewish citizens, the shift from political rhetoric to overt, state-sponsored anti-Semitism was immediate. It was chillingly palpable. Young Werner Angres, a Jewish boy, felt the change on his very first day of school under the new regime. A student in a crisp Hitler Youth uniform lectured his class. He culminated in the chilling demand to shout, "Wake up, Germany! Death to the Jews!" The intimidation escalated swiftly. During the first Yom Kippur under Nazi rule, uniformed stormtroopers crowded the sidewalks outside the imposing synagogue. They spewed curses like, "Bunch of dirty Jews." They also shouted, "Throw them out of our fatherland," at the terrified worshippers. Werner watched the fear etch itself onto his parents' faces. Their rabbi, with a bravery born of despair, quoted Christ. He said, "Lord, forgive them, for they know not what they do." This brought the congregation to tears. The systematic erosion of Jewish rights began with a visible nationwide boycott. On April 1, 1933, stormtroopers blocked entrances to Jewish businesses. They smeared Jude on windows and painted Stars of David on doorways. Julius Stern's small fabric store in Hildesheim was once a bustling local fixture. Now its non-Jewish customers vanished, too afraid to be seen crossing the threshold. In schools, empathetic teachers were replaced by Nazi sympathizers. Young Gentiles, once friends, turned away. Gunther Stern, a bright and inquisitive boy, watched his protector, Heinrich Hennis, join the Nazi youth. He then ceased speaking to him. In choir, Jewish students were mortified. They were forced to sit out while others sang Deutsche Jugend heraus. History itself was rewritten. Students were given razor blades to excise pages detailing Jewish accomplishments from their textbooks. These were replaced with revised, anti-Semitic versions. As the decade progressed, the persecution intensified. It moved from social ostracization to formalized oppression. The 1935 Nuremberg laws stripped Jews of their citizenship, jobs, and public life. They reclassified them as a race rather than a religion. They were forced to adopt Israel or Sarah as middle names. Marking them further, Jewish children were expelled from public schools. They were subjected to chilling Aryan measurements of their skulls and features. This was a pseudo-scientific basis for their dehumanization. Signs proclaiming Juden ist der Eintritt verboten, which means Jews are forbidden entry, appeared everywhere. Gunther Stern was cornered and beaten by 5 schoolmates. He limped home, bruised and broken-hearted. His father, Julius, suffered the same fate. He was attacked by men spewing anti-Semitic curses. The regime systematically plundered Jewish assets. It restricted currency transfers from an initial $10,000 to a mere 10 Reichmarks. This was about $4. By the summer of 1937, during a bicycle trip with friends, Gunther observed ominous military boats. They had heavy guns and Nazi battle flags glinting in the sun along the Rhine. This was a powerful foreshadowing of Germany's preparation for war. The terror reached its terrifying crescendo with Kristallnacht, the night of broken glass in November 1938. In Leerburg, the loud banging on the door jolted young Martin Selling awake. SA stormtroopers pushed him aside, arresting him and his uncle, Julius Laub. They were among the thousands rounded up as mounds of glass shards littered the streets. After a night of shivering fear in the bleachers of the Ansbach sports arena, Martin and his uncle were transferred to a cramped Nuremberg prison cell. It had no running water, only a metal honey bucket and primitive food. On December 22, Martin was told he was going to Dachau. Dachau was a chilling spectacle. It had electrified barbed wire tall gun towers and clicking machine guns under bright spotlights. Above the iron gate, the infamous metal sign declared, "Work will make you free." This was a stark and ironic symbol of Nazi deception. New prisoners were stripped. Their hair was pulled out by dull clippers. They were subjected to cold showers. The overcrowded barracks contained thin wooden bunks covered with lice and flea-infested straw. Men slept body to body in unheated spaces. Daily life was a struggle for survival. They received meager, bug-infested porridge or watery ersatz coffee. It was served in aluminum bowls that had to be spotless despite no soap. Brutal punishments were common. These ranged from solitary confinement to 25 whip strokes that cut into the flesh for minor infractions. Martin witnessed the physical weakening of long-term prisoners. He saw their struggle to maintain balance after being struck by a rifle butt. He even helped a deeply religious fellow prisoner, Ernst Dingfelder, keep his talent. He was determined to hold on to a shred of humanity. One night, an announced escape led to an all-night roll call in freezing temperatures. Collapsing meant death. Martin's letters home from concentration camp Dachau with the return address Schutzhaft, meaning Jew in protective custody, were heavily censored. He could not describe the starvation, weight loss, or frostbite sores. Letters would only be mailed if they stated everything was fine. He signed a power of attorney under the chilling threat of or else. This allowed his mother's house to be sold, severing his last physical tie to home. The systematic horrors of Dachau systematically destroyed Martin's belief in God. It led him to question, if there was supposedly only one God, whose was it? In Berlin, young Stefan Louis experienced Kristallnacht from the Baruch Auerbach Jewish orphanage. Nazis ransacked the synagogue, smashing the eternal light. A cut gas line nearly suffocated the children. They escaped, coughing and choking, through broken windows. Across Germany, synagogues burned, businesses were destroyed. Torah scrolls lay crumpled in the streets. Jewish men were forced to sweep up in front of the burnt shells of their homes. They endured beatings and jeers. Stefan and other children were forced to walk a gauntlet to their new segregated school. They were whipped by Hitler Youth while police stood by. His father, Arthur, released from Oranienburg concentration camp, was physically withered. He was missing teeth. He lived in constant fear. He devised a signal with a parakeet cage to warn his wife, Joanna, of the Gestapo. Kristallnacht served as the final terrifying impetus for many Jewish families to flee Germany. They often left behind all possessions and family. The agonizing choice was clear. They could separate, send children alone to safety, or attempt perilous, often illegal, escapes. Manfred Steinfeld, a boy from rural Josbach, received his USES visa in June 1938. His departure in early July was a series of heart-wrenching goodbyes. His granduncle gave him his last crinkled US $10 bill. His mother, Paula, carefully sewed it into the cuff of Manfred's pants. She ingeniously hid valuable Leica camera lenses in talcum powder cans. This was a desperate attempt to give him a start in a new life. His younger brother, Herbert, idolized Manfred. He repeatedly echoed each auch to everything. Manfred did. He was unaware of the finality of the parting. Manfred shared a long, tight hug and teary kisses with his grandmother, Johanna. He received a final sad wave from his mother. She instructed him to be quiet and do not draw attention to yourself. As his train pulled away, Manfred, deathly afraid, watched his mother grow smaller and smaller. He left with a heavy heart and the profound fear of never seeing her again. His voyage on the SS New York, with the fog-draped Statue of Liberty, offered both inspiration and comfort. It marked his arrival in a new world. Gunther Stern, then 15, faced a similar, solitary journey. His mother's brother, Benno Silberberg, a baker in Saint-Denis-Silberberg, Louis had lost his full-time job. He could only provide an affidavit for Gunther alone. His mother, Hedwig, struggled with the decision. She hoped Gunther could eventually help the rest of the family. His father, Julius, offered poignant advice at the pier. He said, "You have to be like invisible ink." He continued, "You will leave traces of your existence when, in better times, the invisible ink becomes visible again." At his critical interview at the American consulate in Hamburg, Vice Consul General Malcolm G. Burke asked Gunther a seemingly arbitrary math questions. Burke was a man known to bend rules to help Jews. He asked, "What is the sum of 48 plus 52? Gunther correctly answered 100. Burke then stamped and signed Gunther's Judge Endowswise, bearing 2 Third Reich swastika stamps. This secured his entry. On the SS Hamburg, Gunther and other children, eager to be free of Nazi restrictions, were treated to Coca-Cola by an American mailman. They perceived the exotic drink as a sign of his immense wealth. His youthful dreams of adventure remained intact, despite missing his family. In New York, he was overwhelmed by the jumble of skyscrapers. He saw crowded subways and novel automats before being met by his aunt and cousin in St. Louis. He shared a small room and a single bed with another refugee boy, Rudy Solomon. This was a stark contrast to his spacious home in Hildesheim. He struggled with English at Solden High School. He asked his geometry teacher, "Please, what is isosceles triangle?" At his girlfriend Idame Schwartzberg's suggestion, he adopted the name Guy. He excelled academically and journalistically. He interviewed jazz band leader Benny Goodman and Nobel laureate Thomas Mann. Mann spoke of the coming victory of democracy. Stefan Louis' father, Arthur, made the agonizing decision for Stefan to leave Germany. On July 4, 1939, Stefan departed from Anhalter Bahnhof railroad station. His parents, unable to express their profound, unspoken fear, bade him farewell. Stefan, in a silent, symbolic gesture of defiance, drew a triple X on the frost-covered train window. This signified his refusal to return to his homeland. Ernst Angres, Werner's father, was compelled by the fear of his family becoming paupers with no place to go. He orchestrated a risky escape plan to smuggle 100,000 bundled Reichmarks out of the country. In October 1937, Werner received an ominous postcard. It instructed him to come to Berlin without questions. Ernst revealed his plan, meticulously designed to protect Werner from implication. A cancelled flight due to fog forced them onto a midnight train. This inadvertently created a layer of protection as Werner would travel separately. At the German border station of Bentheim-Grenze, Gestapo agents confronted Werner in his sleeping compartment. They held his passport, which prominently featured a big red J next to his grim picture. Werner, following his father's instructions, coolly lied about his father's whereabouts. His knees suddenly wobbled, and a red-hot blush spread across his face. His quick thinking saved him from arrest. The relief was immense upon crossing into the Dutch border station of Oldenzaal. These desperate escapes were often hampered by strict U.S. address, immigration quotas and complex affidavit requirements. America became a difficult refuge. The 1930 Hoover Order, the U.S. public charge mandate, required visa applicants to prove they would not become public charges. This necessitated affidavits from American sponsors. Gunther Stern's Uncle Benno could only provide an affidavit for one person. This forced Gunther to emigrate alone. Later, when Guy Stern sought an affidavit for his family, a gambler casually offered to sign, but a lawyer refused. He said, "Circumvent the law to deceive the U.S. government? No, I will not." This failed affidavit attempt highlighted the devastating bureaucratic hurdles. Manfred Steinfeld's sister, Irma, faced a similar fate. Her planned emigration to England in summer 1939 was thwarted by the outbreak of World War II and the invasion of Poland. This forced her back to Josbach. The psychological trauma of displacement, loss of homeland, and the constant anxiety for loved ones left behind profoundly impacted these young refugees. News of Kristallnacht, with synagogues burning in Germany, froze Guy Stern. It left him momentarily unable to breathe. It intensified his fear for his family. He and his mother wrote often. But their letters became subdued missives with constrained information. This was a kind of code Guy learned to decipher. In summer 1942, an ominous letter arrived from his mother with a Warsaw postmark. The envelope was clearly opened and resealed with an official Nazi stamp bearing a swastika. This signaled a dire escalation. Her message confirmed their grim reality. She wrote, "We have a room here in the ghetto and we are managing." She continued, "We hope for better days." She concluded, "As we told you when you left, do the best you can." This period laid bare the insidious, systematic nature of Nazi persecution. It debunked any myth of spontaneous or unorganized anti-Semitism. From the initial dismissals of Hitler to the burning synagogues and concentration camps, the escalating horror forced Jewish families into unimaginable choices. It forever scarred their lives. It planted the seeds of a deep personal motivation for the future soldiers who would one day fight to liberate their former homeland. The bombing of Pearl Harbor and Germany's subsequent declaration of war on the United States irrevocably altered the lives of German-born immigrants in America. Overnight, they were transformed from hopeful refugees into enemy aliens. Their loyalties were questioned. Their very presence was viewed with suspicion. For young men like Martin Selling and Werner Angres, who had fled Nazi persecution, this shift was a particularly bitter pill. They had arrived on American shores, seeking freedom. They only found themselves initially denied the right to fight for it. Martin, a former Dachau prisoner, had been met with amusement and dismissal by recruiters. He first expressed his fervent desire to bomb Germany. His accent and alien status were enough to deny him a combat role. He was later assigned to the medical corps. This was an insult that filled him with fury and disgust. He felt the army didn't trust him with a gun. It was simply because he was a Jew who had suffered at Nazi hands. Werner Angres, too, discovered the bitter irony of his situation. Inducted into the army, he soon found himself relegated to an alien detachment in the summer of 1943. Housed in small tents in the middle of a field, he and about 20 other German-born Jews were assigned to menial chores. They endured the casual cruelty of drunken soldiers who hurled curses like Nazi pigs. Werner had written in his diary, "Maybe it will be true someday that Germany will be there again for me." He added, "If I were to end up over there, my life would make sense." He wondered how he had ended up in such a humiliating and discriminatory arrangement. He suspected a nearly senile colonel and a suspicious sergeant were behind the ordeal. The very country he longed to serve was, in a bureaucratic twist, treating him as a potential threat. Yet, as the war intensified, a profound realization began to dawn on U.S. Army leadership. Secretary of War Henry Stimson, once skeptical of intelligence, reversed his stance after Pearl Harbor. He issued a directive that acknowledged a crying need for the enlargement of training in combat intelligence. The Army desperately needed German speakers. These were individuals who not only knew the language, but also intimately understood the culture, psychology, and nuances of the enemy. The unique advantages of these refugees became undeniable. These included their linguistic fluency and deep personal motivation. In June 1942, a solution emerged. It was the Military Intelligence Training Center, or MITC, at Camp Ritchie, Maryland. This small army camp, nestled at the foot of the Blue Ridge Mountains, was once a summer retreat. It was transformed into a specialized intelligence facility. Its security was deemed second only to the Manhattan Project. Recruitment efforts leveraged innovative punch card technology. They sifted through tens of thousands of Army personnel records to identify foreign language speakers. This overcame initial barriers that had favored native-born Americans. The camp quickly became a foreign enclave. A cacophony of foreign languages filled the air. Intellectuals, writers, artists, filmmakers, teachers, and students, many older than typical GIs, arrived. They were sustained by the finest chow in the army, prepared by a former Waldorf Astoria chef. Martin Selling's arrival at Camp Ritchie epitomized the unique and rigorous training. He was greeted by tall rock turrets and wrought iron gates. An MP immediately addressed him in German. Inside, he was shocked to see soldiers in Wehrmacht uniforms. A sergeant counted cadence, in German links, 2, 3, 4. This immersive environment where the very language and symbols of the enemy were used as tools transformed these men. Their training was arduous. It focused on interrogation techniques, map reading, and understanding enemy psychology. It was a curriculum that implicitly leveraged their personal histories. It turned their past trauma into a strategic asset. For Werner Angres and countless others, Camp Ritchie offered a chance for redemption. It was a pathway to meaningful contribution. Werner's naturalization as a U.S. citizen on October 5, 1943, was a critical turning point. He took an oath, renouncing foreign allegiance and swearing to bear arms for the U.S. This resolved the precarious security and ethical dilemma he would have faced if captured as an enemy alien. This act of commitment allowed him and his fellow Ritchie Boys to fully embrace their mission. They were driven by more than just patriotism. They sought not merely victory, but a form of divine retribution against the Nazi regime. This regime had persecuted them, stolen their homes, and murdered their families. Their ardent patriotism and invaluable contributions implicitly debunked the myth that all German citizens in America were potential threats. It revealed instead a powerful, secret weapon forged in the crucible of injustice. The Allied invasion of Normandy was a grand gamble for liberation. It thrust thousands of young men into a maelstrom of chaos and close-quarters combat. Among them were the Ritchie Boys, German Jewish refugees. Their linguistic and cultural expertise would prove to be an indispensable, if often perilous, asset on the front lines. Their deployment, particularly in the lead-up to and during D-Day, provided critical intelligence. This profoundly impacted Allied operations. They faced the same brutal realities as any other soldier. For paratroopers like Ritchie Boy Werner Angris, assigned to the 82nd Airborne, June 6, 1944, was a plunge into disorientation. His D-Day jump landed him miles off target. It immediately immersed him in a disorienting solitary fight for survival that culminated in his capture. His harrowing experience, shared by countless others, starkly highlighted the unpredictable nature of airborne operations. It showed the immediate, deadly dangers faced by every man on the ground, regardless of their specialized training. The Normandy campaign that followed was a grinding, brutal affair. It was characterized by the relentless fighting through thick hedgerows and sunken roads. This landscape turned every advance into a costly, painstaking battle. Intelligence fresh from the battlefield was paramount, and it was here that the Ritchie Boys swiftly proved their value. They transformed the raw fear of combat into vital tactical and strategic intelligence. This saved countless lives and led to key breakthroughs. Guy Stern, for instance, overcame his initial squeamishness to conduct early interrogations. These not only yielded crucial information, but also forged his confidence in a non-brutal, psychologically astute. His success, and that of his peers, demonstrated that understanding the enemy's mind was often more potent than force. Martin Selling's interrogation of a German medic, disoriented yet culturally understood, directly led to the accurate mapping of enemy positions. It also led to a decisive breakthrough at St. Lo. This was a testament to the power of precise, human-derived intelligence. Beyond individual successes, the Ritchie Boys developed and honed sophisticated interrogation methods. One controversial but highly effective use of fear technique was tailored specifically to German obedience. It proved particularly adept at extracting critical information about enemy positions and morale. This method, often theatrical in its execution, leveraged the deep-seated cultural anxieties of German soldiers. It offered them a perceived choice that invariably led to valuable disclosures. The critical demand for these unique skills was underscored by the rapid promotion of individuals like Victor Brombert. He ascended from private to master sergeant in just 5 months. This pace astonished seasoned career soldiers. It signaled the Army's desperate need for their expertise. But the war was far from over. The Allies soon embarked on a high-stakes gamble. This was Operation Market Garden, a bold airborne assault to seize key bridges in Holland. Launched in September 1944, the operation showcased both immense bravery and the brutal consequences of flawed planning. Glider operations, intended to deliver troops and equipment silently behind enemy lines, proved precarious and often deadly. These flimsy craft, grimly nicknamed flying coffins, frequently landed catastrophically. They inflicted high casualty rates even before combat began. Manny Steinfeld, a Ritchie Boy assigned to an order of battle team, experienced a terrifying glider crash. It left him briefly unconscious. This was a visceral reminder of the immense personal toll of these air assaults. The desperate high-casualty Wall River crossing at Nijmegen, where American paratroopers navigated treacherous waters under relentless enemy fire, further highlighted the brutal human cost of the operation. The ultimate failure to relieve the British at Arnhem, coupled with the prolonged and brutal fighting that soon engulfed the Hurtgen Forest, exposed a dangerous underestimation of German resistance. It effectively debunked any lingering myth of a swift, easy victory after D-Day. It ushered in a new, grim reality of prolonged attritional warfare. The illusion of a swift end to the war was already shattered by the grinding battles of the Hurtgen forest. It completely dissolved with the German counter-offensive in the Ardennes. Allied intelligence had dismissed all signs. They viewed the snow-dusted hills and quiet valleys as a kindergarten front. This was a place for green troops to rest. This catastrophic miscalculation allowed Hitler to unleash a desperate last-ditch gamble on December 16, 1944. The roar of German artillery at 5:30 a.m. ripped through the pre-dawn quiet. It was a thunderous shockwave that signaled a new, brutal phase of the war. The sudden onslaught, delivered by nearly 500,000 men and 600 tanks, caught the thinly spread American lines completely by surprise. This was particularly true for the inexperienced 106th Division. Infantry from the German 18th Volksgrenadier Division, some clad in snow-white camouflage, appeared ghost-like in the reflective glow of searchlights bouncing off the clouds. They attacked villages like Bleau. This overwhelming surprise led to mass surrenders. It was a devastating blow to Allied morale. It was a grim beginning to the Battle of the Bulge. As the German bulge deepened, threatening to split Allied armies and capture Antwerp, the 82nd Airborne Division was rushed into the fray. Their 13-hour freezing truck ride to the Ardennes was merely a prelude to the desperate fighting that awaited. These paratroopers, accustomed to being surrounded, now faced a new kind of fanaticism. SS soldiers were described as charging uphill like zealots into their machine gun fire. They pressed relentless nighttime attacks. These were illuminated by the eerie glow of rocket-launched flares. It was a brutal, close-quarters struggle amidst heavy snowdrifts, icy roads, and thick ground fog. The 82nd often manned unfamiliar anti-tank guns, reading instruction manuals under fire. Their steadfast resistance, forged in the crucible of earlier campaigns, proved critical. It plugged the 60-mile-deep German salient. It prevented a strategic disaster. The ideological hatred of the Nazi regime was grimly underscored by the fate of Jewish interrogators, Kurt Jacobs and Murray Zappler. They were executed by their captors. This was a stark reminder of the personal peril faced by every Jewish Ritchie boy if captured. Even as the Ardennes raged, the Ritchie Boys continued their vital intelligence work. Their unique skills proved indispensable. Werner Angres, a German-born Jewish immigrant attached to the 508th Regiment, exemplified this quiet, methodical effectiveness. During the chaos of the Bulge, he preferred the front lines. He found the camaraderie of smaller units more conducive to his work. Known for his non-abusive interrogation style, Werner believed in making prisoners feel their information was routine, even unimportant. This approach allowed him to successfully extract valuable intelligence from a veteran German sergeant without coercion. It validated his humane methods and earned him promotions amidst the desperate fighting. This contrasted sharply with the more theatrical Kommissar Krukov persona. That persona was effective in exploiting German fears of Sieg oder Sibirien, or Victory or Siberia, for strategic bombing targets. It was a different facet of their psychological warfare. The high-stakes nature of this intelligence gathering was constantly apparent. A single piece of information could shift strategic bombing priorities. It could confirm enemy atrocities. Karl Lorne, an Austrian draftee and anti-Nazi prisoner, provided such a bounty of classified information through his handwritten diary. It offered a unique window into German morale. It documented a specific atrocity from December 20, 1944. His willingness to cooperate extended to publicly humiliating a defiant German sergeant. He pulled down his visor and remarked, "Look at the big clown who thinks he's still fighting the war." This demonstrated the psychological leverage that could be gained from disillusioned enemy soldiers. The profound personal stakes for the Ritchie Boys were brought into sharp focus by Martin Selling's direct confrontation with an arrogant SS captain. When the captain chillingly regretted Martin's release from Dachau, Martin, a former inmate himself, responded by revealing his Jewish identity. This moment completely shifted the dynamic of the interrogation. It underscored the deeply personal nature of their fight. As the Allied armies pushed deeper into Germany in April 1945, the full, unspeakable horror of the Nazi regime was unveiled. The liberation of concentration camps, first Buchenwald and then Wobbelin, brought the systematic extermination policies to light. This profoundly impacted the soldiers, particularly those, like Guy Stern, Manny Steinfeld, and Werner Angres, who had fled persecution. The stench of death at Wobbelin was palpable even before the camp came into view. It was a visceral assault, confirming the darkest fears of many. The sight of living skeletons amidst dead bodies stacked one atop the other was overwhelmingly nauseating. Some were putrefying, with limbs thin as sticks falling off. It caused hardened officers to vomit. This moment of profound psychological trauma was a stark juxtaposition with the military actions of war. It revealed a horror beyond combat. This period definitively debunked any lingering notions of a clean war. The systematic dehumanization and mass murder exposed in the camps revealed the brutal, deeply personal nature of the conflict. At Wobbelin, during a mass funeral for 200 victims in the palace gardens of Ludwigslust, Chaplain George Chappie Wood condemned the German nation. He challenged their ubiquitous denial. He said, "Though you claim no knowledge of those acts, you are still individually and collectively responsible for these atrocities. For they were committed by a government elected to office by yourselves in 1933 and continued in office by your indifference to organized brutality." This direct accusation of "we didn't know" was met with defiance. German officers turned their backs and lit cigarettes. This prompted Werner Angres to draw his .45 pistol. It was a raw expression of the lingering animosity and the weight of their crimes. The indifference of the residents, who complained only about the Schrecklichs, or terrible, smell, underscored a profound moral blindness. This shocked the liberators and deeply scarred the Jewish soldiers who witnessed it. The unconditional surrender of Germany on May 1945 officially silenced the guns across Europe, but it did not bring an end to suffering. Instead, it marked a stark transition from active combat to a complex, often morally ambiguous, period of occupation, denazification, and the relentless pursuit of justice. For many, the joy of victory was tempered by the chilling realization that the war's lingering impact would define their lives for decades to come. It ushered in a new kind of struggle, a reckoning. For the Ritchie Boys, men like Stefan, the end of the war, ignited a deeply personal mission of retribution. In cities like Aschaffenburg, where battles had recently raged, Stefan volunteered for denazification duties. He was driven by a visceral need to confront the architects of the terror he had fled. This was not merely policy, it was a personal crusade, a hunt for justice against those who had mirrored the systematic persecution his own family had endured. The broader Allied attempt at denazification, however, implicitly challenged the initial perception that such a monumental task could be easily achieved. The sheer scale of Nazi organizations, coupled with a dire lack of qualified personnel, soon rendered the policy impractical. This led to the eventual, unsettling reintegration of many former Nazis into society. Yet, for some, justice was swift and personal. Margaret Buber-Neumann, a survivor of Ravensbrück, recognized her tormentor, Gestapo chief Ludwig Ramdoch, in a breadline. Her desperate plea to Manny Steinfeld, an American soldier, ensured his capture and eventual execution. This was a testament to the individual's power to confront evil. Similarly, the meticulous investigation into the brutal murder of Jewish interrogators, Kurt Jacobs and Murray Zappler, culminated in the trial and execution of Hauptmann Kurt Bruns. This underscored the unwavering pursuit of accountability for war crimes. It was a stark warning that some atrocities would not go unpunished, but for many, the war's end initiated an even more profound and heartbreaking quest. This was the search for surviving family members amidst the rubble. It was the confirmation of the Holocaust's annihilating reach. Guy Stern, the German Jewish refugee who had left Hildesheim in 1937, returned to a city he barely recognized. It was a ghost of its former self. Bombed-out buildings stood like a few teeth in an otherwise toothless mouth. His family's high-ceilinged apartment, once a vibrant home, was reduced to pancaked rubble. Steel beams protruded from heaps of debris. The poignant reunion with Mrs. Ebeling, who burst into tears and embraced him, quickly turned to anguish. Her Ebeling quietly delivered the devastating news. He said, "None have come back from Warsaw." He added, "I fear your family will not return." The words confirmed his deepest fears. They extinguished any lingering hope. They sealed the fate of his mother, father, brother, and sister in the Warsaw Ghetto. Manny Steinfeld would later visit the sterile, deserted Stutthof Memorial Museum. Bureaucratic records there confirmed the deaths of his mother Paula and sister Irma. It was a place filled with too many ghosts for others to bear. The immense personal cost of the Holocaust was further underscored by the tragic news of his younger brother Herbert. He was killed by British soldiers in Palestine. This prompted Manny's anguished question. He asked, was there no place on earth safe for Jews? Martin Selling, another former Dachau inmate, embarked on a similar search for his aunt and cousins. He found only a chilling official list titled Shipped East, yet, in a twist of fate, he would share a warm embrace with his cousins Käthe and Ignaz, survivors of Stutthof. Ignaz recounted the horrors of the camp and the death of his older brother Bernhard from typhus. Martin's enduring dedication to Nemesis, the goddess of fate and retribution, and to the United States Army, encapsulated his personal quest for justice and closure. Werner Angris, an 82nd Airborne Division soldier, received special leave from General Gavin to search for his family. He traveled to Amsterdam, a city gripped by severe post-war food shortages. Families were so desperate they ate grass. On Mother's Day, May 13, 1945, he experienced a profoundly emotional reunion. His mother, Henny, was emaciated. She had lost 40 or 50 pounds. She was so wobbly she could hardly walk. His 16-year-old brother, Hans, presented their mother with crumpled wildflowers. Werner shared precious K-rations, cigarettes, and coffee. He found solace in a hotel room with clean sheets after years of sleeping in holes. But the joy of reunion was bittersweet. He learned the grim details of his father Ernst's death in Auschwitz. It was recorded officially as heart failure. This was a chilling euphemism for the systematic extermination that defined the camp. This reunion, a mix of relief and profound sorrow, symbolized the lasting emotional trauma for survivors. They were forever marked by what was found and what was lost. From persecuted refugees, once labeled enemy aliens, the Ritchie Boys had emerged as vital, yet often overlooked heroes. Their journey represented a powerful narrative contrast. It was from systematic persecution in Nazi Germany to fighting for the Allied forces. It demonstrated extraordinary heroism, courage, and patriotism. Their private crusade to defeat the Nazis, viewing themselves as natural resources in America's fight, had fundamentally shaped the conflict. In the aftermath of war, many established new identities and purposes. Guy Stern dedicated his life to academia. He strove to extract the gold of German culture from the dirt and toxin of the Nazi years. He educated future generations about the Holocaust and the fight against fascism. Stefan Louis shared his story, hoping to make a difference. He said, "My story shows what can happen if people do not act." He continued, "Perhaps if enough people hear these stories, history will not repeat itself." He concluded, "I only hope the world has learned a lesson." Martin Selling echoed this sentiment. He reminded the world that we Jews were undoubtedly the major victims of the Nazi regime, but there were others. The profound secrecy surrounding their operations meant their exploits remained largely unknown to the public, yet their contributions were staggering. Nearly 60% of all credible intelligence gathered in Europe originated from these specialized teams. They saved countless lives. They cemented their place as an arsenal of democracy. Their enduring legacy is not just one of military victory. It is of profound human resilience, the fierce pursuit of justice, and an unwavering commitment to memory. It ensures that the lessons of history, however painful, would never be forgotten.